The morning of April 14th, 2019, began like something out of a Hallmark card. Outside, the small town of Maple Hollow was still waking up. The mist hanging low over the old train tracks, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery on Main Street, and the sound of birds shaking quiet loose from the trees. It was a kind of town where people didn't lock their doors, where every face was familiar, and where the biggest scandal in years was a mayor's son getting caught sneaking into the high school pool after hours. Inside the modest Riley home on Pine Street, a different kind of warmth filled the air. Emma Riley, bright-eyed 17, and with a laugh that could make even the grumpiest neighbor smile, was still tucked under a blanket when her bedroom door cracked open. "Happy birthday, sunshine," her mom whispered, peeking in with a plate piled high with chocolate chip pancakes, dripping with syrup. The smell alone was enough to pull Emma into a half-awake grin. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "You remember the whipped cream," she said, still sleepy. Her mom smiled. "Of course I did. It's tradition." Emma's little brother, Noah, who was 10 and idolized his big sister, bounded into a room holding a small paper crown. "Your queen for the day," he announced proudly, placing it on her head. The kitchen downstairs was decorated with balloons and a homemade happy birthday banner. Emma laughed when she saw it. It was crooked, clearly Noah's handiwork, but it was perfect. She had a busy day ahead. A quick shift at the coffee shop, a trip to pick up some things, and then her friend's not-so-secret surprise party later that evening. She'd been pretending not to know about it all week, playing along every time her best friend Sophie awkwardly changed the subject. It was the kind of day where everything felt light, the kind where you're so wrapped in love and routine that it's impossible to imagine anything going wrong. That afternoon, Emma stopped by the coffee shop where she worked. Her co-workers had brought cupcakes, and her boss let her leave early. She walked home in the gentle spring sunshine, her yellow sweater bright against the greening trees. She'd always said yellow was her power color, and she wore it on days when she felt happiest. Her mom noticed it too when Emma walked through the door. "You look like sunshine," she said, snapping a quick photo on her phone, a picture she would later look at until the colors began to blur with tears. By early evening, the house was buzzing with quiet excitement. Sophie had texted Emma to stall. The party wasn't quite ready. Emma laughed and said she'd find something to do before heading over. She gave her mom a quick hug and told her she'd be back in a bit. "What are you going to do?" her mom asked. "Just picking something up," Emma replied with a smile. It was such a small sentence. Forgettable. Ordinary. The kind of thing you hear every day and never think about again. Except it was the last thing Emma ever said to her mother. 7 p.m. came. Then 8 p.m. The birthday cake sat untouched at the party, the candles waiting for her to blow them out. Sophie called. No answer. Texted. No reply. By 9 p.m., her friend's laughter had turned to uneasy glances. By 10 p.m., Emma's father was driving through town with his headlights sweeping empty streets, calling her name out the car window. Her mother sat at the living room window, the porch light on, phone clutched in her hand. She told herself Emma's battery must have died, or maybe she'd stopped to talk to someone. But in her chest, a slow, cold dread was starting to spread. The kind a mother can't explain, but knows. At 11:15 p.m., her father returned, his face pale and tight. "She's not anywhere," he said quietly. That night, the Riley family barely slept. By morning, they would realize Emma never made it to where she was going, and they would learn something even more chilling. Somewhere between the front porch and night air, their sunshine had disappeared. In the days that followed, the Riley family would learn just how quickly a bright, ordinary day can turn into the kind of nightmare that never ends, and how a yellow sweater would come to haunt an entire town. The candles had burned down to nothing. What was supposed to be a night of laughter and cake had turned into whispers and uneasy glances. Sophie, Emma's best friend, sat in the kitchen with her phone in her lap, scrolling through their text messages over and over, hoping she hadn't missed something. The last text from Emma was at 6:42 p.m. "Be there soon, smiley face." It was almost midnight now. Emma's parents tried to hide their panic at first. They didn't want to scare Noah, who had fallen asleep on the couch with his yellow birthday card still in his hands. But every minute that passed without Emma walking through the door felt heavier. By 10:30, her father had grabbed his car keys. "I'm just going to drive the roads," he told his wife. Maybe she's with someone or her car broke down. Her mother stayed home, keeping the porch light on, staring at her phone, willing it to ring. The minutes dragged. Every time headlights passed outside, her heart leapt, only to crash again when the car kept going. At 11:52 p.m., Sophie showed up at the Riley home, pale and shaky. "She's not answering my calls," she said, voice trembling. "And her phone goes straight to voicemail now. That's not like her." The two women sat in the living room while Emma's father drove every road in town, his eyes scanning every darkened sidewalk, every parking lot, calling her name into the empty night. By morning, the worry had turned into something sharper. Emma's bed was untouched. The birthday balloon still floated limply in the kitchen. Her mother clutched the yellow sweater in her mind, that last glimpse of her walking out the door. At 8:17 a.m., the Maple Hollow Police Department received a missing person report. Normally, they'd tell families to wait 24 hours. But this was Emma, the kind of girl everyone in town knew. This was not a runaway. This was not a fight with her parents. Something was wrong. Detective Carla Mendez, who had known the Rileys for years, was assigned to the case. "We'll find her," she told Emma's mom, gripping her hand firmly. "I promise." By mid-afternoon, the search began. Officers checked local hangouts, the coffee shop, the school track, the park by the river. They called hospitals. Nothing. At 4:10 p.m., a deputy spotted something on Old Creek Road, a narrow, wooded stretch about 2 miles from Riley's home. It was Emma's car. The silver sedan was parked neatly on the gravel shoulder. The driver's door stood open, as if she had stepped out for just a moment. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse was on the passenger seat. Her phone wasn't there, but her favorite playlist was still paused on the car's stereo. No sign of a struggle. No blood. Just emptiness. Detective Mendez crouched by the car, scanning the ground. Muddy tire tracks cut across the road nearby, fresh enough to still hold the shape of their treads. A single set of footprints, Emma's, led from the driver's door into the tree line, but there were no footprints coming back. When the police informed the Rileys, her mother's knees gave out. She wouldn't just leave her car like that, she whispered. She's scared of the dark. She hates the woods. By nightfall, word had spread through town. Volunteers gathered at the fire station, ready to search the surrounding fields and creek. Flashlights bobbed in the darkness as dozens of people called her name. Noah stayed home with his aunt, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor. He refused to go to bed until his sister came back. "She's never missed my good night before," he said softly. As the search pushed deeper into the woods, rain began to fall, the kind that soaks through clothes and chills you to the bone. And in the hours to come, searchers would find something in that rain that would send shivers through the entire town. By the time the search party reached the woods off Old Creek Road, the rain had turned the ground into a patchwork of slick mud and shallow puddles. The beam of a flashlight would catch on raindrops, scattering the light, making it harder to see what lay ahead. Still, nobody stopped. Dozens of volunteers, some in raincoats, some just in hoodies soaked through the skin, combed through the undergrowth calling Emma's name. The sound of her name carried strangely in the rain, sometimes clear and sharp, sometimes swallowed by the damp air. Detective Mendez kept close to the front of the search. She knew these woods, and she knew that after the first 24 hours, a missing person's chances of survival dropped sharply. She didn't want to think about that statistic tonight, but it pulsed in the back of her mind. Emma's father was out there too, flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. Every time he saw something yellow, a wildflower, a soda can, his heart stopped, thinking it might be her sweater. Every time it wasn't, he forced himself to keep moving. Her mother stayed back at the fire station, staring at the maps the police had pinned to the wall, tracing the roads and woods with her finger, whispering prayers under her breath. Noah sat beside her, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes fixed on the door as if he could will his sister to walk through it. Around 10:15 p.m., one of the searchers shouted from down by the creek. His voice carried through the rain, and soon a small group had gathered at the muddy bank. Half submerged in the water was a black phone case. Inside was a cracked phone, Emma's phone. The screen was shattered, but still faintly glowing with battery life. And when Detective Mendez picked it up, a song began to play softly through the tiny speaker. The same playlist Emma had been listening to in her car. The phone had been in the water long enough for mud to collect in the charging port. But the eerie thing was that there were no other belongings nearby. No bag, no sweater, no footprints that the rain hadn't already blurred into nothing. Word traveled fast back to the fire station. Emma's mother clutched her hands together until her knuckles went white. She must have dropped it, she whispered. She must be close. The search expanded into the night, the rain relentless. Police dogs were brought in, but the scent trail was weak, washed away by hours of steady downpour. The next morning, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Volunteers regrouped over coffee and stale pastries, their faces lined with exhaustion. The search had now stretched past 36 hours. Detective Mendez addressed the group. "We're not stopping. Someone out there knows where Emma is. We're going to find her." Her father nodded, but he could feel something heavy settling in his chest, the kind of weight that comes when hope starts to fray around the edges. At noon, a deputy brought in a piece of evidence they hadn't expected. Security footage from a gas station half a mile from Old Creek Road, time-stamped 7:03 p.m. on Emma's birthday night. The grainy black and white image showed Emma's car driving past, followed closely by a dark pickup truck. The driver of that truck had not yet come forward. They now knew Emma hadn't been alone on that stretch of road. But who was in that truck? And more importantly, were they following her, or was she following them? The grainy gas station footage became the search's first real lead. Detective Mendez zoomed in, frame by frame, tried to catch a clearer glimpse of the dark pickup truck's driver. The rain-streaked camera lens made it nearly impossible to see details, but the shape of the truck, older model, extended cab, then above the rear wheel, was distinctive enough for the department to start asking around. By that evening, a call came in from a local mechanic who recognized the vehicle. "That's Mark Talbot's truck," the voice on the line said. "Haven't seen him much lately, but he used to bring it in for oil changes." Mark Talbot, 43 years old, a former neighbor of the Rileys before he'd moved to a trailer on the edge of town. He'd known Emma since she was a little girl, had once given her rides to school when her parents' car broke down. He had no criminal record, no known enemies, but he was quiet, kept to himself. The kind of man people describe with vague phrases. Keeps to his own, doesn't bother anyone, and just a little odd. When detectives knocked on his trailer door, Mark answered in jeans and a faded flannel, looking as if he'd just woken up. "Do you mind if we ask you a few questions about Emma Riley?" Mendez began. Mark's eyes flickered, just for a second. "She's missing, right?" "Yeah, I heard. Terrible thing," he said, leaning on the doorframe. Mendez kept her voice even. "Your truck was seen on Old Creek Road the night she disappeared. Can you tell us why?" Mark scratched his neck. "I was driving home from the store. That's all. Didn't see her. Didn't talk to her." But when they asked to search the truck, his easy tone cracked. "You need a warrant for that," he muttered. The warrant came the next day. Inside the cab of his truck, officers found a small scrap of yellow fabric wedged between the seat and the door. It matched the exact shade of Emma's sweater. When confronted, Mark's story changed. He admitted he'd seen her that night, claimed she pulled over and waved him down, saying she needed help with her car. He said he offered to give her a ride to the gas station, but she got spooked and walked into the woods instead. Detective Mendez didn't buy it for a second. "You expect me to believe you just let a teenage girl walk off into the dark alone?" she pressed. Mark's jaw tightened. "I didn't do anything to her," he said, but his voice was flat, his eyes empty. 2 days later, a farmer checking his fence line about a mile from where Emma's car was found called the sheriff's office. He'd spotted something near the shallow creek that ran along his property. It was a body. Detectives and paramedics arrived within minutes, their boots sinking into the soft ground. The creek water was cold and murky, barely a foot deep, lying just at its edge, her hair tangled in the current, was Emma. She was still wearing the yellow sweater. The sight hit Detective Mendez like a punch. She'd been in law enforcement for 15 years, but there was something about seeing that brightness, that color, against the gray of the water that made her throat close. Emma's father arrived at the scene, but officers held him back. He stood there in the rain, fists clenched, tears mixing with the drops on his face, whispering her name over and over. The autopsy revealed what everyone feared. She had been attacked and left in the creek. The timeline and evidence pointed squarely at Mark Talbot. When confronted with the forensic results, he broke. She wouldn't listen. He said quietly in the interrogation room, "I just wanted to talk to her." But she tried to run and I couldn't let her go. His words drained the air from the room. It wasn't anger. It wasn't remorse. It was as if he were describing an everyday inconvenience. By the time news spread through Maple Hollow, the entire town seemed to move in slow motion. The coffee shop closed for the day. The school lowered its flag to half-mast. Neighbors left flowers on the Rileys' porch without knocking. And in the Riley home, Emma's bedroom door stayed closed. Her mother couldn't bring herself to walk inside. Not yet. Not while the smell of her shampoo still lingered in the air. Mark Talbot was in custody. The trial was coming. But for Emma's family, justice was a hollow word, because they were about to face the hardest days of their lives, the milestone she would never see. The trial began 6 months after Emma's body was found. Mark Talbot sat at the defense table in a plain shirt, his hair neatly combed, as if trying to appear like the quiet neighbor he once was. But no matter how carefully he dressed himself, the jury could see him for what he was. The prosecution laid out the case piece by piece. The gas station footage, the scrap of yellow fabric in his truck, the forensic evidence tying him to the creek where Emma was found. They played clips of his taped confession. Emma's mother sat in the front row every single day, her hands clasped so tightly together that the skin turned white. Her father stared straight ahead, never once looking at Talbot. And in the second row, little Noah sat between his grandparents, swinging his legs restlessly, not fully understanding why his sister wasn't coming back. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted in sobs and whispers. Talbot was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But as Emma's mother later told a reporter, "There's no such thing as justice for this. Justice would be my daughter walking through that door again, and that's never going to happen." The months that followed felt like a blur to the Rileys. Emma's bedroom remained just as she'd left it, the yellow sweater folded neatly on the back of her chair, her school books stacked on the desk, the paper crown Noah had given her on her last morning still perched on her nightstand. Some mornings, her mom would make chocolate chip pancakes, just like she had on Emma's last birthday. She would set an extra plate at the table, even though it stayed untouched. In June, the high school held its graduation ceremony. Emma's name was still on the program. And when it was called, her friends stood and held up yellow ribbons in her honor. Sophie carried Emma's cap, decorated just the way she planned, with glittering letters that read, "Watch me shine." Her father accepted her diploma on her behalf. As he walked across the stage, the gymnasium fell silent, except for the sound of his shoes on the polished floor. He shook the principal's hand, took the diploma, and pressed it briefly to his chest before walking back to his seat. After the ceremony, the family went to the cemetery. They left her cap and a single yellow rose on her grave. Noah placed a small piece of paper beside the flowers, a birthday card he had saved for her the night she went missing. In the shaky handwriting of a 10-year-old, it read, "Happy birthday, Em. I love you. Come back soon." That night, Emma's mother sat on the porch as the sun set, holding her phone in her hand. She opened her saved voicemails and pressed play on the one she'd listened to almost every night since April 14th. "Hey, Mama, I'm heading home now. See you soon." Her voice was warm, alive, full of the future that had been stolen in the dark. As the message ended, her mother whispered into the night, "I'll see you again someday, sunshine." Some people leave footprints so deep on the hearts of others that even time can't wash them away. Emma Riley was one of those people. If you've been listening to her story, hold your loved ones close tonight. Call them. Tell them you love them, because tomorrow is never promised. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our growing community of true crime followers so you don't miss the next mystery waiting to be uncovered. Your support helps keep these stories alive.